Welcome to part 3 of our HTML series. Um, Last time we stopped right here building this cat form, and now we are on step 42. We need to add a button that says submit. So I don't really know what a button is supposed to be, so what I would do, I would go to my MDN documentation and search for button. That's what I'm trying to do here. And then I realized I could just type it up there instead of going through the list. So go ahead and write button. You would see it appears at the top. And it gives you the definition of what a button is in HTML. And also it gives you how to create the button and gives you a couple of examples basically. So it's nice to kind of look at it. You can try it out and see what your button would look like. So a button, basically we use the button element. So I'm going to go ahead and write button, closing tag, and my button must say submit. So write submit. And notice on the right how the button appeared. That's exciting. So when you do tap on submit, what it does, it submits your form to this link above. Let's move on to the next step. We are going to add a type attribute to this button. What kind of button it is, basically, that's what this means. So I'll go to my starting tag and write type, submit. If you read your documentation well, you would see that the example that they also use submit. So basically the submit type basically means that I am submitting the data to the link posted. So now moving on to another input. And remember, inputs are self-closing tags. And this input is going to be a radio. And I want this radio to say indoor. So I'm going to write indoor. Now what I'm doing is creating a label for my radio input and just closing the tag. And of course, it doesn't do much. Step 46 is to add an ID to the indoor input. You know how when you have radio buttons, you can only select one? So that's what I'm doing here. So now we're going to create another label, outdoor. Let's add our type, radio. And you can see on the right, it appeared. Then we wrap this input with a label, right? And what do we want this input to say? So we do want to say outdoor. That's what the user will see. we want the user to only be able to select one. And we achieve that by giving the same ID name. Let's use a different attribute called name and give a value of indoor, outdoor. So the IDs are actually unique, but the name are the same if you want the user to only select either one of those options. So now I can't select both of them anymore, and that's what we want. Step 49 is just about adding a value attribute to both of these radio inputs. And usually it's standard to give it the same name, the same string as the ID. So, and value basically is whenever we receive this data on our end, let's imagine a table. We would see a column called value, and it will list out the value for this specific question. That's where the value become handy when we analyze our data. Of course, right now it didn't do anything, but this is more for data management in the future. So now we're going to wrap um, these two labels into our field set, into a field set element. So go ahead and open tag field set. And of course, don't forget to close your tag as well. So if you remember what a field set does, it creates a grouping, some form of grouping in your form. And let's see how it looks. So that creates that beautiful rectangle around indoor and outdoor input. Moving on, we are 72% complete. So if you've been following along, good job. And if anywhere throughout this tutorial you're lost or something is wrong, don't forget to comment down below. Or if you're enjoying this so far, please send out your support and love. All right, so step 51, we are adding a legend element. So I believe this is a new element. So we are going to add this element as a caption for the field set. So underneath the field set, go ahead and start your legend tag. And this is the text that we are adding to our legend. So you want to inform the user, what do you mean by input outdoor? So, and that's done through the legend. It will kind of like, it is a text informing the user, okay, you're about to select whether your cat is an indoor or outdoor cat. So we do that with the legend element. Let's create another form. You can pause this video and do it yourself. So we are going to add another field set. And if you remember what this does is it creates a rectangle. And inside our field set, we need inputs, but we also need a question. So that's going to be our legend, if you remember from the previous step. So go ahead and add the legend tag as well. And what do we want our legend to say? What's your cat personality? So add that. Make sure you check your code and look how it created another rectangle. So that's kind of cool. Now, under the legend, we are adding checkbox. Remember how we had radio button and you can only select one? And those were inputs. So here, input, the type, instead of radio, it'll be checkbox. So your input can either be a radio, it can either be a checkbox, a text, and so on. So here we need a checkbox. So remember, also remember inputs are self-closing tags, so you don't need to close the tag at the end. And what do we want our input to say, right? Let's check our code, and that was right. Let's move on. So here we're going to add an ID attribute with the value of loving to this checkbox. IDs are a way of identifying the elements that we associate them with. It won't add anything to our form. So now we're going to wrap this input with a label. So there is another way of associating an input element. So remember how we did our radio input and then we wrapped the input with a label? So there is another way of linking your label with your input element, and you wrap the word loving, the text that we want the user to see, and we wrap that around the label and we write for loving. So for loving here is the same as the ID. So it's pointing to the ID input. So let's go ahead and add another checkbox for lazy. You can pause the video and do it yourself and check your solution. But I'm gonna go ahead and add an input. Write the ID, which is lazy. What kind of input do I want? I want a checkbox. And the name, because the lazy ID belongs to the personality group, so I need to give it a same name. So that when the user click on both loving and lazy, I know they are all part of the personality group. And of course, we are wrapping the text lazy um, with our label. And remember, if you do it this way, the label needs to have a for attribute, and the value of the for needs to be the ID, the value of the ID. We are adding another checkbox. So because it's the same, I'm just gonna copy and paste it here and change the values. So I want it to say energetic for my input. I still want it to be a checkbox, so I'm not going to change that. And I still want it to be part of the personality group. However, the label needs to change. Um, the for value needs to be the same as the ID. And of course, my text need to say energetic as well. Let's add a value attribute to each one of these checkboxes. Remember, we have three, I believe. And remember what I said about values? They don't add anything to the site, but what it does is for data management, when we do receive this data in the back end, imagine we receive a table and we're going to have a column that would say, indoor. And later on, when we do back end stuff, we would use these value attribute. So just go ahead and add value. It's good practice to do so. So the first checkbox was loving. The second checkbox was lazy. The third checkbox is energetic. All right, next. Usually when you open a form, there are some default selection already done for you, right? So let's go ahead and add that. And how we do it, you select the options that you want to have as a default. So find out, for example, for us, it's usually the first option. Go ahead and add one more attribute called checked. So you can see on the right, it checks it automatically. And do the same for the checkbox as well. We want to select Lavin. So you see also that it checks it automatically. Now we will add a footer. Yay! This is the last part, guys. Um, so this is a new element, footer. It is usually at the bottom of our websites, and that's usually where you find the legal stuff, the copyright, um, things like that. So inside our footer, we're gonna have a paragraph, and if you remember, it's P, and we need to add the text of this paragraph. And you can see how it added it at the bottom. We are 91% complete, guys. Now we're going to turn the phrase freecodecamp.org into a link. And if you remember how to do that, just pause and do it. Otherwise, the way we do it is by wrapping it with an anchor tag. We've done that before. And we can see how it's been highlighted. That looks right. Moving on. Everything we've been doing so far has been wrapped into the body element. So now we are going to focus into the head. So we have another element. Think of the head as like an introduction in an essay. So let's go ahead and add the head element. And the head element is always above the body. And it doesn't do anything to our website. You can see that nothing has changed, but it contains things like titles that would be above our whenever the browser open a new tab. So, like I said, in the head, let's add a title. Open tag title. Don't forget to close your tag. And for this specific website, we want our title to be Cat Photo App. So let's copy that and paste it here. That looks good. And like I said, it will appear at the top right there. Now let's add another attribute called lang, which stands for language. And we add that inside our HTML tag, by the way, and we are giving it a value of EN for English. Now, every single HTML document always start with the doc type. This tells the browser that this is going to be an HTML file. All right, we have done it. We have one more, one more, a meta attribute. So let's add that to above our title. And this is usually the part that um, it plays a role in search engine optimization, for example. Um, so let's add that. And it's a self-closing tag, by the way. So this would be wrong. I mean, not that it will be wrong, but it's kind of unnecessary to write that like that. Yay, congratulations. You just completed the HTML module for this Free Code Camp online course. You should be proud of yourself. This is what we've built so far. Now, adding other skills like CSS enables us to create something more beautiful than this with colors and font. So go ahead and follow my next module. And if you haven't already, subscribe. And I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial so far.